I was taken into a darkened room, no windows, and sat in a chair, wooden chair. This arm was strapped with leather straps to the chair. I had electrodes which they had soaked in salt water, placed on my arm, stuck on my arm. And of course my hands shot up in the air as the electric current passed through my body. For the next 40 years of my life, whenever I recalled that, I physically shook. Oh, this is so unfair. You are young and beautiful.
Oh, no.
That doesn't help.
And you are too. So nice to meet you.
And you. I'm Carolyn.
Carolyn, and I'm Campbell.
Mercer. Campbell.
2 C's.
Can you give us both a little bit of an intro to who you are?
Yeah. So my name's Campbell. I'm a transgender woman. So I started transitioning when I was 15. So I'm like 12 years into my transition now. And yeah, I get to do amazing things like this and meet you. So it's great.
I'm Carolyn. I'm 75 years old. I passed my birthday last week.
You look amazing.
I'm a parent, grandparent, partner. I was a secondary head teacher for 20 years. Lots of other things.
So you're both transgender. Can you explain what that means to you?
Okay.
When I was born, the nurses looked at my genitalia and said, "You're a boy." Told my parents, "You're a boy, carry on with it." For me, and it is just me, sex you can look at in biological terms,
Yeah.
one of which is chromosomes. In terms of gender, these are societal expectations. So, for example, boys are now dressed in blue, girls are dressed in pink. Up till 1930s, it was the opposite way around.
Really?
Yes. Gender, for me, in terms of a definition, and the government used it, and Stonewall to a degree use it, is that imposed stereotype that some things are acceptable for men, some things are only acceptable for women. So it's aligning what was important to me, transgender, if we want to use that word, is to make sure that how I present myself in terms of those society's expectations and how I feel inside were matched. My bottom line is that I will debate with you what sex is, I will debate with you what gender is, I will not debate with you my identity, because that's mine. That's how I would define it.
Yeah. A spectrum, yeah. So you have female one side, male one side. So for me, I was born a male, didn't fit in that spectrum or that side of the scale. And then haven't even gone in the middle. I've completely jumped over to female because that's who I am and that's who I've always been.
So can you give us both a little sort of what was your childhood like?
I think my childhood was quite difficult because when I was growing up, like I just wanted to be on hormones so bad, and I wanted to start my medical transition, but I couldn't because there were rules in place, and there was like a 2-year waiting list to get hormones or even to be seen by a gender specialist. So a lot of my teenage years was waiting. I feel like as a trans person, your life is waiting lists, just waiting to be seen, waiting to be seen. But you know, from that point when I started taking hormones, it was just like euphoric, because like people say gender dysphoria. I feel like I have gender euphoria now because I can look at myself in the mirror and just be like, I'm so happy. Like I've finally matched what I've always wanted to be. And when I was growing up, I just never thought that would be possible. I'm even getting teary thinking about it, but like that is just like amazing to me.
My childhood was, I was going to say slightly different, but I don't mean that. It was radically different in that I was, remember it was decades ago, over half a century ago, and I was terrified of people finding out because I had no idea what was going on inside my head, because there was no internet, there were no books, there were no magazines. I had no idea that anyone else in the world felt the way that I did.
It must have felt quite like isolating, because now you can literally just go on Instagram, you can go on YouTube and you can find someone that's going through the same as you. But if you're from a time when those things didn't even exist, it's like, who do you turn to?
I didn't even know what hormones were
Yeah.
at that time. So I made sure that nobody suspected how I felt, and I got involved in rugby. In rugby, the toughest, ugliest position to play
Did you
is
find you were like really trying to be
tight head.
masculine
Yep.
just to like
I was
mask
really good
what
at
was
it.
going on?
Absolutely, really good at it. So I played tight head prop forward. I did weightlifting, judo, boxing.
So we kind of like do these things to like hide our femininity, but we end up overcompensating and being someone that we're not.
I certainly overcompensated. I was suicidal. I wanted to be cured. I didn't want to have the feelings that I had. Attempted suicide when I was 16, 17. Saw a psychiatrist when I was 17, and that's when the conversion practice kicked in.
Yeah, that's really like hard to hear, to be honest. Like, because it was just such a different time, and like it really upsets me the fact like you had to go through that.
So when did you first experience gender confusion?
I think I first felt different when I was literally in the playground and my body was different to my friends. Like, I did not understand what gender meant. I used to like be obsessed with Britney Spears, be obsessed with Christina Aguilera. Then I would watch their music videos on TV and I'd be like, wow, I want to be like that. I want to be like a powerful sexual woman and just like be completely free.
I remember at the age of 3 or 4, probably 4, I had a sister who I invented a game where we swapped clothes. And it's never been about clothes, it's never been about makeup. I've never wanted to be a beautiful woman because there's absolutely no way that I could do that.
You are a beautiful woman.
No.
You are.
And I remember from then the confusion and the anger and the aggression in me and hating myself for feeling the way that I did. And that was emphasised by the conversion practice in that it taught me that society must think I'm wrong, bad, evil, because they were prepared to punish me in that way.
When you keep being told the same thing,
Absolutely,
you start to believe
yeah.
it in yourself. So if you're told what you're doing is wrong, what you're doing is evil, then you're going to start to believe that in your mind.
Absolutely. And you have this deep, dark secret that you bury so deep and you just don't want it to come out.
And then when you were both younger, who was the first person you opened up to about how you felt?
I'll let you go first.
The first person I opened up to was, believe it or not, a vicar.
Was it in confession?
It happened in a very strange circumstance. My vicar came round to see my mum, who was out, and I let him in, and I was in floods of tears, and I explained to him how I felt, that I wanted to be cured. And he was the one who organised for me to see a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist then referred me to the NHS, and the NHS, the treatment was being strapped to a wooden chair and electrocuted.
That was through the NHS?
It was, but
Really?
it doesn't happen now.
Yeah, but
I've got to emphasise
I never
that.
knew it was through NHS.
Yes, it was.
I thought conversion therapy was something like on the side.
No.
But that is crazy to me.
Well, yes, it's crazy to me,
can't
and
believe
of course
that.
it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But the vicar was the first person I told, even before my parents.
I think I remember when, I can't remember what age, but someone said to me, oh, you do realise you look like a girl? And I was like, yeah, that's
you
the
very
point.
much.
Yeah. And it took me until I was like 15
To
to
say
say
yes.
to her, I was like, Mum, I don't want my hair cut anymore. She was like, well, you look even more like a girl. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. Like, I want to. And I'd bought some extensions from eBay, some really awful extensions. And I was like, well, I did buy these extensions while you're away. And she was like, oh, put them on. And then I put them on. And then she was like, wow. And then she just really helped me, go to my GP and get
That's
hormones.
awesome.
So she's honestly, like, without my mum, I would never have been able to go through with my
So
transition.
Mum was the first one you spoke to.
Yeah. Love her so much.
So after you went to the vicar, you were referred to the NHS, and the NHS then put you through conversion therapy. Can you talk a bit about what that was? What does that entail?
So, don't burst into tears, okay?
No,
I'm
sorry,
here.
I'd start
I
you.
survived and I succeeded.
Exactly. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm just emotional. It's the hormones.
Okay, no. That's interesting as well, isn't it? The treatment that I had, the so-called conversion therapy, which I've got to emphasise doesn't happen now, although
Yeah.
conversion therapy does happen
Although
mentally.
there is like conversion therapy is being banned for gay people, lesbian people, and bisexual people,
Not yet.
but not for transgender people.
Hasn't yet.
No, but it
No.
will be. But trans people aren't.
There's a campaign of which I'm part of, which will get, I hope, trans people banned for trans people. I want it stopped for everybody.
Absolutely.
It's described as barbaric. The UN describe it that way, and for the government to say there are complexities, yes, there are. Sort them. And that's why I'm prepared to tell my story.
Mm-hmm.
What happened was I was taken into a darkened room, no windows, sat in a chair, wooden chair. This arm was strapped with leather straps to the chair. I had electrodes which they had soaked in salt water, placed on my arm, stuck on my arm. And then opposite, they showed projected pictures of women. And they showed a picture, and then another picture, and then threw the switch. Unpredictable, randomly, it seemed. And of course, my hand shot up in the air as the electric current passed through my body. My arm didn't, because it was strapped to the chair. Now, two things happened. That was repeated. One is that for the next 40 years of my life, whenever I recalled that, I physically shook. So I was doing an assembly with pupils. If it popped into my head, I physically shook. They didn't notice. That stopped in 2002 when I made the changes that I needed to. I don't physically shake now. But what it also did was to emphasize to me how wrong, dirty, bad I was, that I deserved that sort of treatment. And even though they did that, it didn't cure me. Didn't cure me because there's nothing to cure. You can change behaviours, you can't change emotions and thoughts, and that's what happened.
You know, the fact that you had to go through that, I'm not going to cry,
Good.
is just horrible and like painful tip, because I'm putting myself in your shoes.
When did you both decide to transition? And can you just tell us a little bit about what that process involves?
After you.
Okay. I was approaching the so-called transition, aligning my gender presentation with my gender identity, in 1994. I'd been going to Charing Cross since 1987. I managed to persuade them eventually that I needed hormones to try to soften my features and give me some inkling of whether I could present myself as female. Because in 1994, I'd got to the stage where I needed to decide whether I was going to make that change or not. And it got to the stage where I had some breast development, and I literally stayed awake all night to make a decision. I had to. I'd taken time off school because I just wasn't hacking it. And I decided that I would go back to school in a male role. And went to the barbers, had my hair cut, cut my nails, rang up my doctor, my GP, and said, look, I made this decision, I will go back to school. My union, because I was a union officer as well as a head teacher, said there is absolutely no way, because it had been all over the national papers.
Okay, so
about
you had
the head
transitioned.
teacher. Nope. No, I was at the stage where I had prepared to make that change. So, as I say, in September of 1994, it was all over the national papers. This freakish head was going to have a sex change. So after that, decided I would go back to school. I had a bilateral mastectomy, had my breasts removed, and tried to make a go of it. And it built up and built up and built up. And in 2002, I finally decided that that was what I needed to do. By that time, I was bulimic, drinking heavily only at the weekends, never prior to going to work. Oh, no.
Not when you're marking the homework.
No, not at all. No. And increasingly hating myself. And through that, it spoiled relationships with other people. So that was when I made the decision that I made. And not for one fraction of a second have I regretted making that decision.
So yeah, I decided to transition properly when I was 15. So I went to my doctors and got hormones. Well, I say it, I went to my doctors and got hormones. It's not like that. So you go to your doctors, you then have to speak to them about it. The first doctor I went to had no idea what I was talking about. I was waiting months for them to get back to me. Never got back to me, so I changed doctors. And I went to this really lovely lady who honestly helped me so much. She was like, I've dealt with transgender patients before. So she referred me to a psychiatrist, and I spoke to them, and then they referred me to the gender identity clinic, and then I had to have 2 appointments with them, spaced out through a year before I got my hormones. And it honestly felt like a lifetime going through until I got the hormones. I would literally call them up every single day. I'd be like, so when's my appointment? When's my appointment? When's my appointment? Every single day. And it was like borderline harassing them because I was so desperate for these. And
what sort of hormones were prescribed, Campbell? Were they, so-called blockers, or were they estrogen?
So I started taking estrogen, estrogen tablets, and then I had injection every month in my stomach here called Zoladex or Goserelin, and it was like a knitting needle, and they stick it in your stomach and release this like synthetic thing, and then that just kills all your testosterone. So I had that every 6 weeks for like 5 years. It was so painful.
I can imagine.
Yeah. I think, when I was 17, 18, I used to look in the mirror and not like, I'd been on hormones, but I wasn't completely happy with the way I looked. I feel like hormones really helped me. But yeah, I probably wasn't happy until I was like 21, 22, until I'd had my gender reassignment surgery and had all of everything else. Sometimes it's not even about the way you look, like it's actually about how you feel inside. And I used to see being trans as such a bad thing. I used to never tell anyone I was trans, and I kind of like hated myself for it. So it doesn't matter about looking in the mirror, it's about the way you feel inside, and I feel like completely content and happy inside, and that's only been within the last few years. So
obviously right now there's a lot of discussion around trans rights, and it's become a sort of politicised issue. How does that make you feel? How has it all made you feel these last few years, I suppose?
I feel like sometimes it's crazy, like you're just like reading something and then the next article is like a debate on your body. It's like our bodies aren't up for debate, or our bodies aren't political, we're just people. And it's so tiring to see your identity debated every single day, or someone's like, because you're trans, everyone's going to think you have an opinion on everything that's trans. Like, what do you think about trans women in sport? What do you think about trans women in swimming? Like, sometimes I just don't want to know.
The media is predominantly horrendous at the moment, and I've seen it getting worse over the last couple of years. The Mail, for example, online, I'm quite happy to be challenged on this. Mail online, I found half a day a fortnight ago where there wasn't a trans article. I found the day a month ago where there were 7 trans articles, all anti. And the half day that I found that there wasn't a trans article was the Queen's Jubilee. And even by the afternoon, they'd found an anti-trans article. I know that there are issues. You mentioned about sport and so on. I have different views on that to many people, perhaps, because I can still lift 200 weight because of the shape of my body. 200 weight for Jacob Rees-Mogg, which is about 100 kilograms. It's not to do with testosterone, just. So there is an issue. And the line that I would follow is that it's up to individual sports how they deal with it. Certainly in terms of weightlifting, boxing, they have weight categories. So to single out trans is just being deliberately cruel. It's not to do with testosterone, certainly, but there are ways of dealing with it. And I don't think we're handling it particularly well because we're not being generous. We're not thinking it through. We're feeling, oh, let's attack them because they're awful people. No, I'm quite nice, really. I hide it well, but I am.
Does the current coverage in the media make you angry?
I have trained myself over the years not to be angry. I am frustrated, very frustrated, that people can't see the humanity. We are all human. We all deserve respect as human beings. I do find it immensely frustrating and tiring that you have to try to counter what is clearly, to me, totally illogical. There is no reason why anyone who doesn't know me should have even an opinion about me. Why does it matter to anyone else how I look, how I live, or who I love?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like sometimes when you're trans, like, people think they can ask you what they want. It's like you signed a contract and, like, so your body is everyone else's. So people can ask, oh, do you have a penis? Do you have a vagina? What's this? What's this? What's this? And I feel like people think they have a right to ask you what they want. Really, like, what everyone has is no one else's business. And if someone chooses to speak on their experiences, then let them. But I think there's a line.
We've spoken there about the kind of abuse you've received online and stuff like that, and that's obviously horrendous. How do you feel when people, like, you see someone like Ricky Gervais making comments about the trans community? How does someone famous, when they're talking about, does that feel even worse in some ways, or how does that make you feel?
I feel sorry when I see people that are against trans people, because I'm like, well, you're just going to be on the wrong side of history in the future, because, you know, you see all these articles about gay people from years ago.
Yes.
And that's what's going on with trans people right now.
There is nothing more powerful than a word, and once it's a bit like an arrow. Once it's loosed, you can't take it back. The most unkind thing anyone can do is to laugh at you.
Yeah.
And it's not laughing in isolation with a comedian, it's laughing at you. And that, I don't think, is acceptable. I don't deserve it. I don't warrant it. I don't want it. I wrote a new verse for John Lennon's Imagine. Imagine there's no gender. It's easy if you try. No trans, no gayness, no lesbian, no bi. Imagine all the people living life at ease.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You're a songwriter.
No, not at all. Why do you think you get abuse online? Because you talked about abuse online. Why does it matter to other people how you are?
I don't know. I think it's just like, it just goes back to that, like, toxic masculine behaviour. Like, a lot of the comments I get online are from, like, straight men, and, you know, they'll, like, tag their friends in my videos or pictures and be like, can you believe that's a man, or whatever. And it's like, I don't know, like, I just feel like people are trying to impress their friends. So they're like, oh, look at this, but it's not big and it's not clever. So, you know, you can keep saying what you want, but yeah, I think people aren't educated, and it does take people like you to educate them.
There was a famous English philosopher called John Donne who said that no man is an island of himself. And we are all islands. But if you think about islands, they're all joined to every other island under the sea. You just can't see the join. People are joined to each other We need to respect each other as being different and yet so similar, so joined together. What I do affects you, what you do affects me and other people.
What would you say to someone young that's watching this right now that kind of has those feelings of confusion? What would you say to them?
There is information available. There are people to talk with. If you are confused about your sex, gender, then find somebody to talk with who will listen to you.
I would just say it's probably so cliche to say, but like it gets better. Like it really does get better. Like the world is changing. The world is becoming a better place. I would just say like hold on to like being trans. Don't feel like you're a freak. Don't feel like you're weird. Like use your uniqueness to get where you want in life. Like use it as a positive thing. And I think once you start using something that makes you unique from everybody else, then you can just thrive. So I think, don't be too hard on yourself. Speak to your friends, speak to your family. And if someone doesn't accept you, then can I swear?
Yeah.
Them.
Millions of people could potentially watch this video. What can the people watching this video do to help further trans rights?
There is petitions out there for you to sign. That makes a massive difference. Like you might think it's not something good, but I mean, one signature makes a whole load of difference. And even sharing that. So because I'm trans on my social media, a lot of people follow me because I'm trans. But if someone that isn't trans shared it to their story or to their profile, they have a whole different reach to what I do. So they're like, their brothers, their sisters, their family, their friends are going to see that. And cisgender people, which if people don't know what that is, that means someone that is, born a woman and completely feels like a woman and their gender aligns with what they're born as. So you can put something out there that other people are going to see. And also, I think a big thing as well is if you see someone say something bad or, a situation happen, literally call it out, because if you don't, that person's still going to be in the dark of what the right terms are or how to go about things. So,
So there are activist things that people can do, but most importantly is whoever you see a person, you see a human being. That human being deserves respect and acceptance. Whatever their colour, whatever their religion, whatever their gender, sexuality, whatever. That can be done by anyone at any time and should be done.
Who does your makeup? Is your hair your own natural colour? Wow. And they want to know, well, when you had surgery, have you got the same as me? And the answer is yes, but I don't have the messy bits.